What's good, fellas? So UFC Fight Night Vettori versus Cannonier is about to take place in just a couple of hours, so I'm really cutting it close today. Another one of those types of cards, but I'm still getting it in there, so this is going to be a valid card prediction regardless, and I'm actually looking forward to this main event. Unlike last week's main event, that's for damn sure. That was not a main event that I was looking forward to, and I low-key fell asleep at the very beginning of that one. But anyways, speaking of that card, this was my prediction rate as of last week. Now with that card in mind, I went like, I don't even know, 6-5 or something. It was kind of terrible. And I mean, 11 fights on a pay-per-view card is ridiculous. So I mean, whatever. That card's cursed. I don't even care. It's in the past. Now on to this card. First fight of the night: Zach Puaga versus Modestas Bukauskas. I'm gonna go with Modestas Bukauskas. I feel like he's on a run now that he's coming back into the UFC, or he's about to start a run, and most likely secure himself back in the top 15 again, like he was prior when he was in the UFC. Zach Puaga is good. He only has one loss to Muhammad Usman, who seems to be a decent prospect in his own right. I feel like Zach Puaga is definitely better suited for light heavyweight, but I think he's too sloppy on the feet for someone like Modestas Bukauskas, who's quick and young and aggressive. So I'm going to put Modestas by a KO. Moving on, we got Dan Argueta taking on Ronnie Lawrence. I'm going to go with Ronnie Lawrence probably by a TKO. Actually, no, not by a TKO. Dan Argueta's tough as fuck. I think he's just going to win by a decision, just by having more activity in the first and the second. And I feel like in the third, Dan Argueta might kind of wear on him and maybe get his takedowns. But if Dan can't get them early, I just don't see him winning this fight on the feet, especially when Ronnie Lawrence is a lot more accustomed to being in the cage, fighting in the octagon. He's going to be way more comfortable in there, and he's already a lot smoother on the feet as is. So I'm going to have to pick Ronnie Lawrence, probably by a decision. Let's say he wins the first and the second round. Second round's going to be really close. Third round goes to Dan Argueta. Next up, Teresa Bleda taking on Gabriela Fernandez. I'm going to go with Gabriela Fernandez simply because she honestly, low-key, because I flipped a coin on it earlier, but simply because she is a little bit more experienced, and I feel like that really comes into play in the UFC. I don't really have much of a breakdown to give for this fight because, to be honest, I haven't seen too much of either of these fighters, so I would just be capping out my ass if I tried to speak on it. I'm just going to go with Gabriela, though. Moving on up the card, Carlos Hernandez taking on Dennis Bondar. I'm going to go with Dennis Bondar. He kind of had a bullshit UFC debut. He fucked up his arm. I think he broke something. I don't really remember, but I remember that he hurt himself, and it went down as a TKO, first round TKO loss. But in reality, he really hasn't got to show himself in the UFC. And this is a difficult one to call because Carlos Hernandez is good and he has showed himself in the UFC. But I feel like Dennis Bondar has been UFC caliber for a while and has been showing that on the regional scene, and we just haven't gotten to see it in the UFC yet. So I'm going to trust him to put on a pretty good performance and get his name boosted up to the main fans, or to some of the casuals too, even if any casuals are going to be watching the prelims of a fight night. That'd be pretty crazy. But yeah, early prediction, Dennis Bondar. Moving on up the card, Kang Kyung-ho versus Christian Quinones. I'm going with Christian Quinones. I mean, this dude looks like a killer. And Kang Kyung-ho has been in the UFC for way too long. I don't know how he's still around, just getting fights. It's kind of crazy. He has been KO'd one too many times in his career for me to trust him against a up-and-coming fighter like Christian Quinones, who only has a couple losses, young, and has dynamite in his hands. I just with the confidence too, I have a hard time picking somebody like a vet like Kang Kyung-ho. So I'm going with Christian Quinones by knockout. Moving on, Jimmy Flick versus Alessandro Costa. This is the main fight of the prelims, the prelim headliner. I'm going to go Alessandro Costa. If Jimmy Flick didn't botch his last fight when I picked him earlier at the beginning of the year against Charles Johnson, then I would still be riding with him now. But I just feel like after he retired for a reason, and then he comes back, he gets KO'd really quickly, and I don't trust him against somebody like Alessandro Costa, who's dangerous, especially in the first round, on the ground and on the feet. I definitely don't see him beating Jimmy Flick on the ground. That'd be pretty impressive if something like that happened, but I do see him sparking him on the feet and getting him out of there relatively quickly. So we're going to go with Alessandro Costa via second round TKO. And now into the main card, Nicholas Dalby taking on Muslim Salikov. I'm going with Muslim Salikov. I feel like he is just a little bit better on the feet. And if it were to go to the ground, I would trust Nicholas Dalby's wrestling because Muslim's old and he's not the greatest grappler. But I don't think it will go to the ground. And I feel like Nicholas Dalby makes it too close in his fights, and Muslim Salikov is not the type of fighter that you want to make it close against. I could see Nicholas Dalby getting knocked out, but I feel like what's more likely is a decision where Muslim just kind of dominates all the rounds or just like outpoints him and wins handily. The only thing that has me a little bit nervous is that Nicholas Dalby does have the potential to get a draw with somebody like Darren Till in his prime, and that's impressive. Not to mention he has good striking and good grappling. It's a good mix-up, but I just don't think he has enough to outstrike Muslim Salikov, so I'm going with Muslim. Moving on, Manuel Torres taking on Nicholas Mata. This one is kind of up in the air for me. I'm going to side with Manuel Torres. He's young, he's talented, but it's kind of the same with Nicholas Mata. And at one point in time, he was like looked at as the next up-and-comer. But he got knocked out by Jim Miller, or was it subbed? One of the two. But if you're not somebody that can get past the Jim Miller test, then I don't know if you can really hang. And we don't know enough about Manuel Torres yet, so maybe he can't hang either. Maybe I'm going to be proven wrong tonight. But I have a feeling that Nicholas Mata is going to just fold under Manuel Torres' pressure, and eventually he's probably going to get subbed. So I'm going to go with Manuel Torres via submission. Next up, Pat Sabatini versus Lucas Almeida. This is a tough one. I'm going to ride with Pat Sabatini, especially because he's coming off of a loss, and I feel like he's the type of guy that wants to rebound strong. But I mean, I'm sure most fighters do, but he seems like somebody that would take it like extra serious coming off of a loss. But the problem is he's taking on somebody that's a dangerous finisher, only has one loss, and is low-key a counter-style matchup, in my opinion. I feel like if it stays on the feet, it's just like, it's bad for Pat Sabatini regardless. But if it were to hit the ground, it's not necessarily bad for Almeida, if you see what I mean. So, I mean, it's funny, despite all that, I'm still picking Pat Sabatini, but it's close. So I'm going to go with him by a decision. And then we have Armen Petrosyan taking on Christian Leroy Duncan, feature fight of the night. Christian Leroy Duncan's undefeated, and I feel like we didn't get to see enough of him in his last fight because his opponent kind of got injured midway through. But he was looking good, and he was definitely looking like he was going to end up winning the fight. And I trust him to win this fight against Armen Petrosyan simply due to that reach advantage. But even if it were to go to the ground, I think Christian Leroy Duncan has a massive advantage there. So he can get it finished literally anywhere, in my opinion. I could still see Armen Petrosyan pulling it off because he's a dangerous fighter and he only has a couple losses. So he's still pretty good and untested in his own right. But I feel like Christian Leroy Duncan's going to come in here and put the hands on him. Maybe even get him up the cage, get some aggressive takedowns, manhandle him on the ground, and end up dominating a decision. I could see him knocking him out, but I feel like Armen Petrosyan's young. He has a chin, he's got heart. So I don't think he's just going to fold off of whatever Christian can throw at him. Then on to the co-main event of the night. Arman Tsarukyan taking on Joaquim Silva. This is the lock of the card. This is Arman Tsarukyan by whatever he wants. Joaquim Silva's been knocked out by some fighters that I just feel like would never even hold a candle to Arman Tsarukyan. And I'm not trying to glaze him too much, but he really is that caliber fighter. He deserves to be in the top 5. I don't remember what he's ranked these days, but he's definitely a top 5 caliber athlete. And if certain fights went other ways in the judges' scorecards, he could be in that position fighting people like Justin and Dustin, Rafael, and all those fighters, Benil. But he's not. He's fighting Joaquim Silva. He's been gifted a sacrificial lamb. And I think he's going to go out there, take him down, murk him on the ground in the first, and in the second he's going to end up either picking up a sub quickly or he's going to knock him out, and it's going to be vicious, and then he's going to call a shot at somebody in the top. If he says some shit like, I'm just going to take whoever Dana gives me, I honestly, I might just turn that shit off in that moment and then wait until the main event starts because I'm so tired of fighters saying that. Just pick a name. Just say one name. One fucking name. Make it a little bit more interesting. It's not that hard. Some fighters, do the most when they can't just give a straight answer in the post-fight and give a name. I get the respect aspect of it, but I also don't give a fuck, buddy. This is fighting, and if you call a name, you can make more bread, make this shit more interesting, get your ranking. Main event time, Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier. I'm going with Jared Cannonier, even though I've been wanting to pick Marvin leading up to the fight, but at this point, I just feel like I have a bad feeling that Marvin's chin is going to get cracked. Jared Cannonier is just going to be the guy to do it. He's going to go out there, put mitts on him. I think they're going to be trading. It's going to be a chess match on the feet for probably like the first couple of rounds. And then at some point, he's going to get smacked by Jared. It's going to hurt him bad, and Jared's going to finish it off. And it could be a TKO, like up against the cage. I could see that. But I have a feeling that we could see a vicious knockout, and we could see one of the best chins in all of MMA, in all of the sport, especially current day MMA. Marvin could have the best chin, and I think we actually might see it get sparked. If not, and if Marvin can really sit in the pocket and trade with someone like Jared and just wear him down and get his takedowns, this could be a dominant Marvin Vettori decision. I don't see him finishing Jared at all, not even like a submission. Maybe if he caught him on the feet, but I think Jared has too good of a chin to just get knocked out by Marvin's hands, of all people. But on the flip side, I could definitely see Jared Cannonier landing some crazy shit and getting Marvin out of there in like the third round. So that's what I'm going to side with. That's what I'm going to put on verdict. I might even slap a little bit of money on it. Let me know what you guys are going to pick, though, down below, because I'm interested in everybody else's picks. How are y'all doing this year on your picks? Like you saw at the beginning of the video, I think I'm like 63%, something along those lines. And hopefully after tonight, I'll be 10-10 in main events, so I'll be back to evens. And maybe I can get back above a negative record, above evens with my main event picks, because I'm really tired of going 1-for-1 every card and fucking up for the fans, man. Fucking up for y'all, because I need to be having better picks like I was at the beginning of the year. Enough of that ramble, though. Stay tuned. I will post the results for the fights tonight. I'll catch y'all.